It was a quiet Tuesday morning when Sarah's voice broke through the silence, the kind of voice that made her father, Mike, stop in his tracks. "Daddy," she whispered, her small hands gripping the edge of the kitchen table. "I need to tell you something." Mike looked up from his newspaper, his brow furrowing as he noticed the serious expression on his 8-year-old daughter's face. Sarah, usually full of life and energy, seemed drained, her eyes wide with fear, her voice barely audible. "What's going on, sweetheart?" Mike asked, his voice soft, yet full of concern. Sarah hesitated, looking over her shoulder toward the hallway. She knew her stepmother, Vanessa, was in the living room. Sarah had always been told to keep quiet about certain things, especially when it came to Vanessa. But today, something had changed. Today, she couldn't keep it to herself any longer. "Vanessa, she's not who you think she is, Daddy." Mike's heart skipped a beat. Vanessa, his new wife, had been a huge part of their lives for the past 6 months. To say they had a difficult start would have been an understatement. But over time, Mike thought things had been getting better. Sarah had begun to warm up to Vanessa, even if the relationship was still a little strained. But now, hearing these words from his daughter made his stomach twist. "What do you mean, sweetie?" Mike asked, standing up slowly, his mind already racing with questions. "What's going on with Vanessa?" Sarah looked up at him, her eyes filled with genuine fear. "I hear her talking when you're not around, Daddy. She's not nice like she pretends to be. She says she doesn't want me here, that she doesn't need me, and that I'm just getting in the way." Mike's heart sank. He tried to hold back his initial panic, but his mind was spinning. Could Vanessa really be saying these things? Could Sarah be hearing something that wasn't true? "Sarah, you know you're not in the way, right? You're my daughter, and nothing will change that." Mike crouched down beside her, trying to reassure her with a calm voice. But Sarah shook her head. "I'm scared, Daddy. She's not like she seems. Last night, I heard her whispering, and she said she would get rid of me if I didn't leave." Mike stood up quickly, his heart pounding in his chest. He hadn't heard anything that would suggest Vanessa was capable of something like that. He had seen her be kind to Sarah, or so he thought. But hearing these words coming from Sarah made Mike realize that maybe he had been blinded by love, by the need to believe everything was fine. "No, Sarah, that's not true," he said, trying to reassure both himself and her. "Vanessa would never hurt you. I'll talk to her. She's probably just having a bad day. But you don't need to worry." But Sarah wasn't convinced. She looked up at Mike, her eyes full of terror. "Daddy, I heard her talking last night. She said she's going to make me disappear. She said you'd be better off without me." Mike froze, the words hitting him harder than he could have anticipated. Disappear? What was going on? Why hadn't he noticed any of this? Why hadn't he heard the same things? Before he could respond, Sarah added, "I'm scared, Daddy. I don't want to be here anymore if she's going to do something bad to me." Mike's protective instincts kicked in. He couldn't let this continue. He couldn't sit back and let his daughter live in fear. "Listen to me," he said, his voice filled with urgency. "I'm going to figure this out, okay? You don't have to be afraid. But I need you to stay in your room for a bit and lock the door. I'll take care of everything, I promise." Sarah nodded, though her fear was still evident. Mike could see that the last thing she wanted was to go back to her room. But he needed her to be safe, to be out of harm's way. He needed to protect her, and he wasn't going to let anyone, especially Vanessa, hurt her. Mike rushed upstairs to his bedroom, his mind racing. Could Sarah have misunderstood something? Was Vanessa really planning something sinister? Mike had to know the truth. He couldn't take any chances. He went to the closet, grabbed his jacket, and stepped back into the hallway, ready to confront Vanessa. As he walked down the stairs, he felt a sense of urgency. Something wasn't right. He needed to get to the bottom of this. Fast. If Sarah's words were true, then the safety of his daughter was in jeopardy. Mike's heart pounded in his chest as he descended the stairs, each step feeling heavier than the last. He had to get to the bottom of this. Fast. There was no room for hesitation. His daughter was scared, and if Sarah's words held any truth, then Vanessa was hiding something far darker than he could have ever imagined. As he reached the bottom of the stairs, he could hear Vanessa humming from the kitchen. The sound, once soothing, now felt like a warning bell in his ears. Mike took a deep breath and walked toward the kitchen, trying to steady himself. Vanessa looked up from the counter when she saw him, her face lighting up with a warm smile. "Hey, babe, you're home early. Everything okay?" Mike didn't return the smile. He stood in the doorway, his arms crossed, watching her with a piercing gaze. "We need to talk." Vanessa frowned, her smile faltering. "About what?" Mike didn't waste time. "It's about Sarah." Vanessa's eyes narrowed slightly, and for the first time, Mike saw a flicker of something unfamiliar in her expression, something defensive. "What about Sarah?" "She's scared of you, Vanessa," Mike said, his voice low but firm. "She told me some things last night, things that don't make sense." Vanessa's posture stiffened. She set down the knife she had been holding, her hands trembling slightly. "Mike, I don't know what she's told you, but I've been nothing but kind to her. She's just going through a phase. You know how kids are." Mike shook his head. "Number Sarah's not going through a phase. She said you've been telling her that she needs to disappear, that you don't want her here anymore." He stepped closer to her, his voice growing more urgent. "Is that true, Vanessa?" For a moment, Vanessa stood frozen, her lips parting as if she were about to say something, but no words came. The silence between them grew heavier. Mike could see her calculating, weighing her options. He could feel the tension in the room thickening with each passing second. It was clear she was hiding something, and whatever it was, Mike wasn't going to let it slide. Vanessa broke the silence, her voice barely above a whisper. "Mike, it's not what you think." She stepped closer to him, her face softening, but her eyes remained distant. "I've been trying so hard to make this work with Sarah. She doesn't understand that things have to change. She's just so attached to you. I thought if I told her, if I pushed her away a little, she'd start to rely on me more." Mike's heart sank. What Vanessa was saying didn't sit right with him. She was speaking as if Sarah were the problem, as if Sarah's fear and rejection were her fault. But it wasn't Sarah's fault. It was Vanessa's actions, her words, her treatment of Sarah, that had caused this. "I don't care what you thought," Mike said, his voice now shaking with anger. "Sarah is my daughter, and if you're trying to drive a wedge between us, you're going to regret it." Vanessa's eyes flickered, with something darker now, her expression shifting to one of cold defiance. "You don't get it, Mike. I'm trying to build a life here, and Sarah is in the way. She's been in the way from the start. You've always been so protective of her, but you don't see what's best for this family." "That's where you're wrong," Mike replied, his voice rising. "I'm protecting her from you, Vanessa. You've made her feel like she doesn't belong here. And now, you're trying to tear us apart." Vanessa's face hardened, her eyes narrowing as she took a step toward him. "You're being dramatic. You don't even understand what I've had to put up with. This is what happens when you try to bring someone new into your life, Mike. You can't just expect everything to be perfect." Mike took a deep breath, trying to steady himself. He couldn't let Vanessa's manipulation control him. He had to keep his focus. For Sarah's sake, he had to make sure she was safe. "Don't ever talk about her like that again," Mike said, his voice icy. "I'm done letting you hurt her. You need to leave. Right now." Vanessa's eyes flashed with a mixture of shock and anger. She opened her mouth as if to say something, but Mike didn't wait for her response. He turned and walked toward the stairs, his steps purposeful. He had to get to Sarah. As Mike reached the top of the stairs, he heard the sound of movement behind him. He glanced back to see Vanessa standing at the bottom, her face twisted with anger. But Mike didn't flinch. He couldn't afford to. He reached Sarah's room and knocked gently on the door. "Sarah, it's Daddy. Can I come in?" There was a long pause, and then the door creaked open. Sarah's face appeared, her eyes wide with fear. When she saw her father, she ran to him, throwing her arms around his waist. "I'm scared, Daddy," she whispered, her voice trembling. Mike held her tightly, brushing her hair away from her face. "You're safe now, sweetheart. I won't let anything happen to you." Together, they stood in the room.